please excuse any hair-related shenanigans in this video. I had just come back from boxing and my hair really didn't want to listen to me. Alright, we're back. Part 2 of this little precursor to Gotham Knights for anybody who's interested in what the Court of Owls is or how they connect with the Bat family. Basically, any questions that you might have about the group's comic origins and onwards will probably be answered in these videos. If you haven't seen the first part of this breakdown, then I'd recommend that you watch that first. Just head to the description, toss it into a new tab, and then hop back over when you're done. It goes over the Batman Court of Owls and City of Owls storyline where the court is introduced, and it also covers the Talon spin-off. A lot of the stuff in this video might not make sense if you haven't read their original comic appearance in the New 52 or watched that video, so I would recommend it. If you are just gonna go straight into this video though, I do want to announce that this is a video game channel, not a comic channel. I know that's a weird thing to announce, but just in case you wanted to follow the channel going forward, I don't want you to do so under false pretenses. I usually just cover the game straight up, but because Gotham Knights is coming out and I'm a big Batman fan, I thought I might as well go through the comic history as well. This half of the series is more concerned with the Bat family and their intersections with the court, but before we touch on that, I should mention that there is another somewhat important Court of Owls appearance relating specifically to Batman in the comics that I didn't mention in the last video. The Court of Owls was part of the DC Metal crossover. I won't spoil exactly how or even what happens in that story because it's much bigger than the scope of what we're talking about here, but their role is more of a setup in that event. Essentially, the Electrum experiments that they used to make Talons were one of the catalysts in opening a big multiversal doorway. And the most important thing for us to know from this is that the fountain that Bruce drank from in the labyrinth when he was trapped there was actually filled with Electrum, meaning that he had it in his system at some point, which is potentially very important for Bruce Wayne's fate in this game. Now that we got all of that out of the way though, we can finally move on to... The Night of Owls was a crossover event that happened in between Batman issues 8 and 9. If you remember during the 7th issue, it's revealed that the Court of Owls is sending out their undead Talon army to take out major figures in Gotham, and the 8th issue sees Bruce fending them off in the Batcave. There are way too many assassins going after too many people though, so the whole family needs to be called in to help, which is what the Night of Owls covers. Most of these tie-in issues follow a very basic structure of good guy find Talon, good guy protect people from Talon, Talon dies somehow, and I'd say for the casual reader this stuff is non-essential, but given that Gotham Knights is about the Bat family in particular, it makes sense to cover some of the key moments in their comic encounters, and this crossover gives us more intel on Nightwing's whole situation with them. First up is Batwing. Now the actual story here isn't really worth covering. It spends a long time steeped in whatever's going on with Batwing solo, and I think there's maybe 2 people on planet Earth who have any amount of curiosity on what Batwing is up to right now. His fight with the Talon is also pretty short and simple, and the only thing I wanted to mention with him is the intro sequence that outlines the Court of Owls deciding to retire one of their Talons, Alexander Stoughton, back in the 1800s for being too out of control and reckless, something very similar to what we heard about the Gotham Butcher in the Talon story. And the more examples that we're given of Talons, the more we see some going way too far for what the court wants, or some just completely bucking back against them, and you have to wonder if Electrum is responsible for that. The Talons were indoctrinated by the court, and as killers it makes sense for a higher ratio of them to succumb to wanton violence, but it seems like the court is able to perform their indoctrination kind of easily. They were even able to turn a regular young girl against her mom in what seemed like days during the Talon story, which makes it plausible that one of the side effects of Electrum is straight up insanity. We know a concentrated dose gave Bruce hallucinations, so it would be interesting if Electrum disease or something of the like shows up in this game or any potential sequels. There is a prequel comic for Gotham Knights coming out, remember, and the premise of that story is that a disease is spreading around the city, and I wonder if Electrum could be responsible for that. It's like a scarecrow gas situation. Next up is Batgirl, and again, the most important part of this issue is the backstory that its Talon is given. The one in this story is a scarred, mute girl named Mary Turner, whose origin revolves around the balloon bomb sent out by the Japanese in World War II, which is an actual thing that happened, killing one group of civilians in Oregon that was on a picnic, with the rest not making the journey or not detonating in dangerous locations. Mary Turner in the comics was part of that family in Oregon that was killed in the attack, being left with a lot of serious injuries, and just a quick question, isn't that kind of offensive? I don't know the full logistical details, they were weirdly hard to find, but isn't it weird to take a real-life tragic event and then make a character whose origin story is being part of that event? I'm sure it happens all the time, but I feel like it's worse because this is such a small group of people. Like, it's one family in Oregon that got bombed and you made a fictional character out of it? I don't know, that feels weird, but whatever. Mary is the Talon that Batgirl winds up fighting, and at a point in the fight, Batgirl's hanging off a cliff and says, "When I get up there, I'm so gonna pound you," which, I mean, shit, I wish you would talk to me like that. I hated that. Mary lets her go out of remorse, and we're shown that Gotham was targeted by the same style of balloon bomb from World War II during the Night of Owls. In Batgirl Annual 1, which isn't part of the Night of Owls strictly, we see Catwoman bust out Mary Turner from prison, and it's clear that Mary is more scared and unhappy with what she's forced to do than just psycho. So by the end of things, she helps Batgirl and Catwoman take out a member of the court despite his orders, and she's taken under Batgirl's wing. See, the joke is that she's a bat, and Mary winds up on the Birds of Prey. Red Hood and Damian Wayne Robin also meet the Talons in Red Hood and the Outlaws 9 and Batman and Robin 9, and those issues cover Red Hood stopping a Talon from killing Mr. Freeze, who actually made a deal with the Court of Owls, and Robin protecting a high-ranking officer from a Talon who was meant to kill off his entire bloodline years ago, but failed. Like the others, the actual story might not be super important, but these two start setting a pattern for the Bat family that I find really interesting. Damian Wayne mentions that the Talons aren't unlike him in many ways, raised by the court to be killers just like he was with the League of Assassins, and Red Hood has a conversation with another Talon who breaks down about his process of death and resurrection, which obviously Jason can relate to. In terms of Batgirl, she gives somebody who suffered a crippling disability a new purpose despite everything, which can be tied to her experience in the Killing Joke. In the New 52, she actually recovered from what Joker did to her. Most of these encounters had some kind of parallel between what the Talons were going through and what the Bat family was, and I reiterate, if the Talons in this game are just brainless zombie killers, that's a huge letdown. There's a real chance to draw connections between the team and their enemies if you put in the effort to do so. The event continues in Catwoman, Birds of Prey, and even Detective Comics with the Dr. Arkham rescue I mentioned in the last video, but there's not much that we need to talk about here. It's just more backstories of Talons which will probably have less relevance to the game and have no bearing on the court overall in the comics. But if we're gonna talk about the connection between the Court of Owls and the Bat family, we finally need to tackle the Nightwing of it all. I said that we would get to the Nightwing part of the original story eventually, and we're finally here. All I left it at was that Dick Grayson had some kind of connection to the court and the Talon that almost killed Bruce, but that was it. So if you've been feverishly waiting for the answer to what they have to do with each other, and you're also unaware of the existence of Google, here you go. The Talon on the examination bench was named William Cobb, and he is Nightwing's great-grandfather. I already did that joke last time. But the connection runs far deeper than that. It's not just that Cobb is related to Grayson, it's that Grayson's fate is tied directly to the Court of Owls. Remember when I quickly mentioned in the last video that the court plucked out their assassins from a circus that was famous for its acrobats? Well, the name of that circus was Haley's Circus, and if you're familiar with Dick Grayson, you know that that was the same circus that he was a part of as a kid. This revelation hits him like a slap in the face, and then Bruce actually hits him with a slap in the face, knocking out a tooth and revealing that this whole time Nightwing had an owl-shaped tooth implant of Electrum placed in there by the Court of Owls. He was chosen by them as their next assassin, and this deposit would have given the court the ability to resurrect him should he die. Given this big revelation, Nightwing actually has two crossover issues with the Knight of Owls, with both revolving around his fight with his own great-grandfather, and I assume that this information will have some big impact on Nightwing's relationship with the court in the game. In the Nightwing issues, we're given the story of William Cobb, a young street performer who always felt like an outsider in his city. He describes it as being a child living in Gotham, not a child of Gotham. As his skills as a performer grew, he was eventually taken in by the circus and fell in love with a girl from a much more well-off family than his. They had a good relationship, but her father, Burton Crown, disapproved, drawing a line in the sand between the black and white, the good and bad of the world and of Gotham. He forbade them from their relationship despite her eventually getting pregnant, and she was shipped off to marry somebody else, with the world believing that the baby was his. William Cobb became a Talon, enticed by the court's stance as the Grey of Gotham, something that Crown had declared was non-existent, refusing for a man born of filth to marry his daughter as if he could rise out of the black and into the white. Race metaphor, question mark? And eventually he stole his son away from his mother to be taken in by the Court of Owls, declaring him the Grey Son of Gotham. Grayson became the surname, which is kind of goofy, but whatever, and that's led us to here, showing us that Dick Grayson wasn't just selected to serve the Court of Owls, he was bred for it. It was his legacy, and I'd argue that in a lot of ways, Dick Grayson actually has more of a connection to the Court of Owls than Batman does. In fact, apparently the Court of Owls was initially planned as a story for Dick Grayson's Batman, a continuation of Black Mirror, but it was adjusted to be a Bruce Batman story for the New 52, so needless to say, Nightwing is crucial to the concept of the Court of Owls. That wraps up all of the Knight of Owls stuff. It was basically just the Bat family wrangling up and defeating some of the Talons, and the conclusion of the court story at the time being was handled back in the main Batman storyline that we covered in the last video. It includes most of the Bat family's face-to-face encounters with the court, but there's actually one event that I'd find more relevant to the potential story of Gotham Knights, because it involves the court manipulating and focusing directly on some members of the family for an overarching goal, and that event is Robin War. Now, there's a bit of backstory that you need to know for Robin War before we dive into the court's plan. Basically, Batman is believed to be dead at this point, and the mantle has actually been taken up by Jim Gordon. But in response to Batman's initial absence, a bunch of kids decided to take vigilante justice into their own hands with the We Are Robin movement. The idea is that anyone can be Robin as long as you're fighting for the side of good, which is a sweet sentiment, but like, also this kid kills a criminal and a cop by accident in the midst of a bunch of commotion, whoopsie. Maybe having regular ass children fight crime isn't a good idea or something. That incident leads to something called the Robin Laws. I swear some of these names names were written by toddlers. But basically everyone, including John Oliver, is telling these kids to stop being vigilantes, and it's actually illegal for kids to sport Robin's colors or symbols. At one point, one of the leaders of the We Are Robin gang actually gets stopped in the street for having red shoes, and he tries to explain that he's just a blood, he's simply reppin' colors. But he gets arrested for wearing red for Robin, which I think is really funny because, like, A, is no child allowed to wear red now? That's kind of ridiculous. And B, why'd you point out his shoes? The man's wearing a bright red hoodie, guy. Anyways, this uproar and the continuing secret meetings of the We Are Robin gang wind up catching the attention of the actual Robins in Jason Todd, Tim Drake, and Damian Wayne, and they decide they're gonna handle this with the help of Dick Grayson, who's gone off and started his own thing outside of Gotham. Turns out the whole Robin Laws thing was a ruse set up by the Court of Owls, actually the Parliament of Owls, which is the international version, to get their gray son back in the city of Gotham and into their service, using their connections to city lawmakers to essentially create a Robin-centric problem big enough to get Nightwing involved. Most of this story follows the fake Robins being trained by actual Robins, and then Nightwing actually tricks them all into getting captured, including Damian, Jason, and Tim, so he can go and handle the problem with everyone safe somewhere else. His search leads him to the court, and he realizes that the point of all of this was for him to be drawn back to the city. The idea actually came from Lincoln March, again see part 1, who was disgraced from the court after his betrayal, but was able to weasel his way back with this plan to bring Dick Grayson back into the fold. But something that they didn't expect was for somebody even more beneficial than him to offer their services to them, which is what ends up happening when Damian Wayne joins them willingly as their Talon, mask and all. And I wonder if this plotline will relate in any way to this scene where Batgirl is rocking Court of Owls drip. Damian actually volunteered because he saw what the Court of Owls was planning to do if they did eventually lose control of the city, where they would unleash a scourge of elite Talons who had no sense of order or reason. They were a backup that would essentially wipe Gotham off the map. It was a real if I can't have it, no one can kind of situation. To stop that from happening, Damian decides to join the court to appease them, but during the battle is convinced to switch back and fight the court head on. Dick Grayson strikes a deal with the court to serve them in place of Damian, and to keep him in line, they reveal that Damian basically has a nanobomb in his head administered through the mask that he wore that would detonate if Nightwing fell out of line. Robin War actually ends with the court getting what they want, and I think a targeted approach to enlisting Dick Grayson could be a major part of Gotham Knights' story, which is funny to theorize on so close to its release. Every time I say something, I prepare for it to age like milk, but I think there's elements that could be cherry-picked from Robin War that could actually be used in the game. The ending of this event actually leads directly into the next Nightwing encounter, so we might as well just cover the rest of his history with the court in the next section. There are 2 arcs in Nightwing Rebirth, which is the character's ongoing storyline, that deal with the Court of Owls. Now, I'll be honest, I don't really like either of them. The first one was alright, and the second one is mega stupid, but because Nightwing does have that strong connection to the court, I feel like we do have to talk about it here. Both storylines kind of boil down to some harebrained scheme from the court to recruit Nightwing as their Talon, and to me it sort of demystifies and normalizes the court. They seem like they're just constantly failing and acting like a bitter ex, not to mention the whole Parliament of Owls idea, taking away their localization to Gotham. I don't really love any of that stuff. They turn kind of boring eventually, but hey, oversaturation was to be expected, I guess. Like I said, the first Nightwing arc is an immediate follow-up to Robin War, and it starts with him finding a way to remove the bomb in Damian's head in the first 10 pages, so already the court's threat has no weight. That problem solved itself so fast. Lincoln March is also taken out by the court immediately despite his help in procuring Nightwing because they don't like him, so that whole Robin War event feels like it's wiped out in 3 seconds. Nightwing decides to work the court as a double agent. They send him on missions, he tries to gain intel and ruin their plans. He only takes the non-lethal assignments for the time being, but the court is pushing for him to be the assassin that they asked for, and because of his unwillingness to kill, they team him up with a dude called Raptor so the mass murder can begin in proper. Throughout this very short arc, Raptor just gets flipped back and forth like a pancake. He's a member of the court, sadistic and villainous. No wait, he's actually kind of cool. No, he's letting kids get captured. Psych, he's playing the long game to see when to strike. Nah, we're just kidding, he murdered this man. Oh no, that guy was just holding his breath. But then the shocking twist, he's actually been evil this whole time. This man's trying to set a world record for the most bait and switches in under 100 pages. Raptor and him save a boat of refugees for the court, but it turns out they're only saved for slave labor, and while Nightwing wants to betray the court now to stop this, he realizes that it might be better to wait it out, save more people, and then make the court really bleed. Raptor seems to agree with this during one of his actually a good guy moments, and after a little fun adventure with another push and pull of his motives, Nightwing and Raptor decide it's finally time to fight back against the court once they learn of the refugees' fate as blood sacrifices in the labyrinth, a labyrinth in which the Minotaur, the monster, was them. They free the refugees, the order of the court morphs into this giant owl beast that they have to fight, Raptor sacrifices himself, what a hero, and exactly 4 pages later we find that he's been secretly working Nightwing from the beginning for a totally different group. Wow, frankly, I'm shocked. The second arc deals with amnesia, so we already know that this will be a well thought out and inspired storyline. Basically, Nightwing gets no-scoped by the KG Beast in one of the issues of Batman, and during his time in a coma, Bruce assigns a doctor to help heal him up. The doctor, though, is secretly a court member, and she's repressed his memories after his parents' murder in order to eventually replace his Bruce Wayne memories with new synthetic ones where he's been trained as a killer for the Court of Owls. Most of this arc, Dick has amnesia, and it's all build up for the court to finally get control over him. There's a lot of filler, and then finally William Cobb, his great-grandfather, is able to slip on some glasses that make him look like a straight-up frog person and implant synthetic memories in place of the old ones. Under the spell, Dick Grayson turns into a Talon and begins attacking the group of Nightwings that took his place after his memory slipped away, stopped short only by Condor Red's sneak attack that takes him to a bridge in Gotham. Dick gets the upper hand and his great-grandfather is looking on approvingly, but then what's this? He regains his humanity at the last second by looking into the eyes of an innocent man? Whoa, this book is really full of unique ideas. Can you tell this one was a slog for me to get through? Dick Grayson is able to shake free of the mind control, which means that this whole process, giving him amnesia, replacing him with new Nightwings, alienating him from the family, giving him a whole new life, sending William Cobb after him, and brainwashing him led to exactly one issue where he's the Talon and almost kills someone. You gotta love it. He fights Cobb on the bridge, he falls into the water and disappears. He tracks down the doctor that brainwashed him, she falls into the water and disappears, and they haven't been heard from since. Awesome. And with that, we've covered basically every appearance of the Court of Owls in the comics. They also appear in some movies and TV shows. They're in the Gotham show, they're the main antagonist in Batman vs. Robin, an animated movie that sort of smushed the original Court of Owls storyline with some of Robin War. It's pretty good, honestly, one of the better Batman animated movies. I would recommend it. And they also show up in the newest season of Harley Quinn in a very different setting. Let's just say that if this is the Court of Owls that we see in Gotham Knights, then the only diseases they'll be spreading will be of the ST variety. I do find that the more appearances they have, the less interesting I find them. The veil gets lifted and they just seem like a joke at a certain point. Like, they can't ever get their plans to go right. It feels like I'm watching a group of Scooby-Doo villains. But if you portray them with a level of mystery and keep them in the shadows, they make a very effective villainous force. So here's hoping that the game can live up to that. Speaking of the game, now with most of the court's history outlined in front of you, I'm going to take a couple of cracks at what I think will happen in the story of Gotham Knights, which I'm assuming most people will watch this after the game's out, so it'll be entertaining to see if I got anything right at all. I'm hoping for at least one. First of all, I want to go on record saying that I think the camps in this game, think Ubisoft camps or Fisk hideouts in Spider-Man, are going to be Court of Owls hideouts in Wayne buildings. We talked about it last video, the Court of Owls hid inside of Alan Wayne's buildings for centuries, so I'm going to assume finding the entrances to these and then taking out the members hiding there is going to be the most logical way to add these big territory snatching objectives that open world games love having, and if that's not how they do it, then honestly that's a hell of a missed opportunity. I also think that the Gotham Butcher is going to be a boss, like I also mentioned in the last video. He's a big brute, lesser known but tied to the Owls. I think he would be a great boss, and I also think that the concept of using sub-zero temperatures on Talons will be a major mechanic. If we look at this Red Hood fight with a Talon, we see that it regenerates during the fight, but it doesn't do so after he uses this bomb that could very feasibly be made of liquid nitrogen. It's got the right look, so hopefully that idea is utilized well in the game and may even tie into whatever Mr. Freeze is doing. And obviously the big one, the big kahuna, is Bruce Wayne still alive? And I'll keep my prediction somewhat short here. That boy dead. But not for long. We just spent over 40 minutes between these two videos talking about how the Court of Owls has a bit of a tendency to bring people back from the dead. We talked about a point in the comics where Batman was blown up and very quickly after was trapped in the labyrinth for over a week, and people worried that he may be gone forever. We also know that there's Electrum in the fountain in the labyrinth. We know that Electrum is what revives Talons. We've seen a hero die and be brought back to life permanently by the Electrum process. We see Batman going crazy because of it. It looks like a lot of people went crazy because of it, so I'm gonna say Bruce Wayne, explosion, taken to the labyrinth, drinks Electrum, goes crazy, dies instead of rallying against the Talon like in the comics, has already fallen off the deep end mentally by the time this happens, is brought back by the court, fights the Bat family in the end, either comes back as some zombie Batman, which I'll only accept if he's a villain in this franchise, or we'll get that cliche of he realizes what he's doing, that these are his friends, all that mushy stuff, he sacrifices himself for them and finds a way to die permanently. And you know what? Screw it. The game ends with the reveal of Damian Wayne making his way into the Belfry. If the actual story is way more lame than what I just said, then I'm gonna sue WB Montreal. So there you have it, a full look at the Court of Owls in the DC Comics. I don't think I missed anything crucial. I did skim through some less important appearances like in Green Arrow or Batman Who Laughs. I just didn't waste time with stuff that I knew wasn't really important to their story as a whole. If I did miss something important, then please leave it in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed. If you're new here and you want to hear me talk more about video games, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.